If you're watching this video on the NES YouTube channel, there's more information and useful links in the description below.
So thanks again to everybody who is listening. My name's Lynsey. I'm an anaesthesia associate at the Royal Infirmary in Edinburgh. And throughout this chat, I'm going to explain what I mean by embracing my inner sidekick and how I came to do this. I'm going to throw in a minor disclaimer at this point. My presentation had to, hi Nicola, my presentation had to be rejigged at the last minute to avoid infringing on any copyright laws. So all of the images are photos that I've either taken myself or are of me. Some might make you laugh. They'll definitely make me cringe, but hopefully it won't be too distracting and it'll get the message across. So I'm going to start with a cringe. I grew up in a scheme in the south side of Glasgow called Castlemilk, and I had been told from a young age that I would be the first in my family to go to university, and that was that. So I thought, okay, fine. Unfortunately, there was no real guidance or support from school. I discovered a bit too late that a technicality meant that I wouldn't have a chance of being accepted to do medicine. So I decided that I would stick with my strengths and that a science-based degree would be best. And after 4 years at Glasgow University, I graduated with a degree in neuroscience. That's all fine and well, but what I didn't know was that not all degrees guarantee a job at the end. And I was left facing student debt, bills to pay, and no direction other than I wanted to work in some sort of clinical role in a hospital and be patient-facing. Fortunately, my aunt was a sister in the operating theatres at the Southern General in Glasgow, now known as the Queen Elizabeth. And she mentioned that there was an available position of a clinical support worker. I had no idea what that meant, but I thought, great, if that gives me the opportunity to get some clinical experience, I should go for it. And fortunately, I managed to get the job. Suddenly, my eyes were opened, not only to the roles of healthcare support workers, but ODPs, midwives, porters, physios, admin teams. Hospitals were full of people that weren't doctors and nurses. Who knew? To this day, the experience and knowledge that I gained as a support worker is absolutely priceless. I learned so much from my fellow support workers, and in particular, I'd like to shout out to Glynis. And I saw how central they were to the daily functioning of the theatre and the efficiency of the theatre list. To this day, my support worker colleagues are absolute fonts of knowledge, and our theatres just couldn't function without them, without some of you. It was in my time at the Southern that I learned about this new role that was being created, and 23-year-old me thought, oh, why not? A new clinical role with training that meant I could apply my skills, and in my case, my degree. It seemed like an absolute no-brainer, and here I am, 16 years later. I currently work full-time at the Royal Infirmary of Edinburgh as an anaesthesia associate, and this means that I work under the supervision of a consultant anaesthetist within a multidisciplinary team to assess patients prior to surgery and plan, prepare and deliver anaesthetics. I've been in this role for 15 years, which is a bit scary to think of, and I've been based at the Royal since 2009. Now, you would think that with over a decade in the role, that it would be well defined, integrated into the department and established within the service. But unfortunately, this isn't the case. And this has occasionally caused me to question my purpose, my value and my significance within the wider NHS. Now, don't get me wrong, there are many, many aspects of my role that I love. I love being part of a team. I love working in theatres and clinics. I love meeting and caring for patients, and I feel privileged to work for the NHS. Over the years, I've tried to develop and innovate, but I've often been met with resistance within my department, and particularly from senior colleagues. Now, times are changing, and attempts are being made to flatten the traditional hierarchy within the NHS. However, as some of you will recognise, change happens very slowly in the NHS sometimes, and it's often also actively resisted, depending on who you are. Personally, there have been times when I've felt more acutely that I am a tiny fish in a huge ocean. And a few years ago, this feeling of insignificance got to me, and I felt like a little like I did after I graduated. I'd studied again, I'd worked hard and achieved my goal, but I was questioning where I fit into this organisation, and I lost my enthusiasm for my job and my motivation just to keep my head down and get on with it. Now, I'm hoping that you're not already wanting this talk to be over, but I would like to ask you to spend a few seconds thinking about its end. At the end of this talk, or the learning week, what did you really want to get out of it? Why did you sign up? I'd like to give you a few seconds just to consider this and perhaps jot down a brief answer, some bullet points, a sentence, a couple of words. You can either pop them in the chat or you can pop them down in front of you on a bit of paper. I'll give you a few seconds just to do that. Now, as we all know, motivation is absolutely huge. If we aren't motivated to begin with, the chances are that we won't get anything of value from whatever activity, job, or course we participate in, and the end product probably won't reflect our true abilities. This is an absolute disaster in our roles, as if we don't know why we care, how can we be sure that our standards of care are met? It's usually easy to rhyme off what we do and how we came to do it. But at the end of the day, the key factor is our motivation to complete or participate in the first place. I'm an anaesthesia associate, and you've heard how I came to work in this role. But what's my motivating factor? What's my why? The concept of starting with why was, it's a term coined by Simon Sinek in a 2008 TED Talk called How Great Leaders Inspire Action. And he used the concept of starting with why in terms of business leadership. After hearing about this concept, it stuck with me. And this is something I often do before undertaking any task. In the context of my work, my overarching reason why I do what I do is that I want to help care for others. And doing this job is the best way I know how. And I'm sure many of us feel that way. The big why can be obvious. And in my moment of self-doubt and feeling insignificant within my department and role, the grand why wasn't the issue I had. I was trying to figure out my specific why. What was my cause and where did I fit into my organisation? Now, at the time of my personal why crisis, I participated in a course called Delivering Better Care Leadership Programme, which introduced me to the concept of leadership. As an experienced member of the department, I'd become a sounding board for colleagues. I'd developed educational resources and protocols, but I felt a bit stuck in limbo between my job and that of a manager, and I felt powerless in some ways. Because of my non-doctor, non-nursing role, promotion wasn't going to be an option for me. That had been made clear to me. So what would or could I do? The course highlighted that we can all be leaders, regardless of role, and that being a manager was a totally different concept. And this was refreshing and absolute music to my ears. Now, after introducing this concept, they asked us why we were participating in the programme. and what we wanted to get out of it. And these were my notes. I wanted to develop my role. I wanted to be a positive force for change. And I wanted to become a recognised leader. These were my motivating factors. But how was I going to get there? Now, during this time, I encountered a situation which caused a bit of a light bulb moment. I had finished assessing and preparing a patient for their anaesthetic, and she was so grateful despite the fact that I thought I was just doing my job. She took my hand and looked me in the eyes and said with absolute conviction, "You're all heroes." Now, my instinct was to say, "Oh, I'm not a hero, I'm just..." How often do we all say this? I'm just. I thought about the situation afterwards and that I was uncomfortable being called a hero. And I realised that yes, occasionally I may be someone's hero, the main character admired for having done or achieved something exceptionally brave or great. But more often, my role is of facilitating or supporting the heroic achievement. This is sometimes difficult to accept or recognise as a positive, particularly when we compare our roles or ourselves to those with clear professional pathways and ambitions for promotion, especially in an institution where hierarchy and title used to play a huge role and sometimes still does. And I reflected on this and realised that there's value in being a second or third or fourth in command, a sidekick, if you will. I was going to achieve my personal why by confronting this. So, with my inner geek on high alert, I looked at what commonly defines a sidekick. I realised that the qualities which define a sidekick are those which also define a leader. So sidekicks are leaders. Leaders are sidekicks. How was I going to embrace this? Where should I start? I realised that feedback from colleagues which I had received annually as part of my appraisal held the answer. As many of us do, I had dismissed comments and positive feedback in the past as my colleagues just being nice. But on reviewing these comments, considering what I'd learned about sidekicks and leadership, on reflection, I came to the only conclusion that I could. I am not Batman. I am Robin. I'm not Sherlock. Evidently, I'm Watson. Much to my surprise, I was already seen as a leader, despite not being aware of this myself. I was already a good sidekick, I just hadn't recognised it. Now, this isn't to say that we don't need to be heroes sometimes, the same way that being a manager and being a leader require different qualities at different times. Sometimes we need to be in charge and take a leading role. For some of us, however, we are more often the supports. I'm trying to show that in a world of those competing to be heroes, it's actually sidekicks that are the backbone, the continuity, and we can all play that part. We can reinforce that we all share a common goal, both personally and as an organisation, and highlight that we all play a crucial interdependent role. Being a sidekick is not a negative. We may not get the spotlight or the cape, but we are just as significant and valued. So once I'd embraced my inner sidekick or my inner leader, I had to find ways of maintaining and nurturing this and helping others see their sidekick value when they were struggling with their own why. I have the ability and the responsibility to be proactive in maintaining my sense of value and purpose and helping others to do the same. We all do. So what have I done? Well, if you're not overloaded with the superhero theme, I've developed my own utility belt. And in general, this has 3 main pockets, which you may already use or be familiar with: feedback, reflection, and education. I would absolutely encourage you all to seek feedback, but to accept it when it's given. Support colleagues by giving them feedback that is positive and constructive. This is something we can all do that can make a huge difference. And it's everybody's responsibility, not just managers or those in senior roles. When it comes to reflection, this is absolutely key to learning and developing positively. And it's what makes us consider our why. And it's what helped me to find my inner sidekick. Education is also crucial. I think it's great to work towards new goals, no matter how big or small, and they can get us from our whys to our what. Currently, I'm responsible for meeting the educational needs of pre-assessment nurses, and this has led me to participate in an MSc in clinical education through Edinburgh University. And this is helping me work towards my future goals in supporting nursing education, which you could consider to be my new why. Now, if we go back to the beginning, and if you did make a note of why you participated in this presentation, and I saw that some of you have added it to the chat, I hope that I've met your expectations now. We are almost at the end. I would like to encourage you to consider using the concept of starting with why, particularly in times of motivational crisis, and consider the concept of being a leader or a sidekick, depending on what title you prefer. Personal qualities like self-awareness and confidence, self-control, resilience and determination are at the foundation of how we behave regardless of your role. I would encourage you all to embrace your own inner sidekick and harness these qualities and embrace your own power in your role. Doing so will positively impact our shared fundamental why to provide safe, patient-centred care in a job and an environment that nurtures us all. Now, I would suggest that by participating in this programme, you've already taken the first steps. And finally, as colleagues, I hope that you see, no matter your role, background or future, we are all a blend of heroes and sidekicks, and that there's strength and value in both. We just have to seek it out at times or help others to recognise this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lynsey. I can see so much activity going on in the chat and so much resonation with people. I've also seen people giving each other advice on learning as you've been talking as well, which is absolutely great to see. So we've got 10 minutes or so. If anyone wants to be brave and stick a wee hand up, if anyone's got a question for Lynsey or if anyone wants to say anything. I know everyone gets really comfortable with the chat and the comments that are coming in are great. I hope you can see them, Lynsey, but if not, we'll find a way for you to see them. And the gifts are just outstanding as well. Anyone want to put any questions to Lynsey? Nicola.
Hi there. Hi. So I came in running late and I'd had to take a phone call, so I missed the first 3 minutes or so of your story. I caught the end of it, which sounded amazing. So you'd started off in the science. Am I right in saying that? Yeah. And then you've developed into this career, initially starting as a support staff member. Am I right in saying that? Sorry.
Hi there. Yeah, so I basically after school I went to university and did a science-based degree.
Yes.
And discovered that that wasn't going to be that basically you go to university, you're not guaranteed a job at the end. It was an absolute shock to me. And my aunt was a sister in the theatres in the Southern General in Glasgow, and she mentioned the role of a clinical support worker, which I was unaware of, but fortunately I applied and I got the job as a clinical support worker, and I worked in the theatres at the Southern General for a couple of years. And it was when I was there that I heard about this course that was being rolled out, this role that was being introduced, and off I went to study again. But the experience that I got being a support worker gave me huge insight into all the people that are in a hospital that you don't even know about, and the role of a clinical support worker, which is just, I mean, I don't want to get too gushy. I hope that by participating in this learning week, you'll all be realising how valued you are within the whole of the NHS. But just in theatres in particular, we just couldn't function without you all. And I'm really grateful that that was kind of my stepping stone, my first step into a career in the NHS.
So did you find it, because I've personally never been to university, obviously you're academically, you had already had that challenge before you became a support worker. So for me personally, I've never experienced university, but I've got 20 years experience in a support role, and I am kind of struggling to take the next step for that, just for fear of failure, I suppose. Yeah, so that's it. So but I suppose I just need to look into the correct procedures, where to go next and whatever. But I'm sorry, I don't mean to take up all your time. I see there's lots of other people looking for questions. Sorry. Thank you so much. Thanks.
What I would say is that I mean, it's been 15, 16 years since I started my training, and in that time, and in particular the work that NES are doing with kind of recognition of prior learning and things, for me, university was my path to get to where I am. That doesn't have to be the same for everybody, and there are so many opportunities where, you know, whatever your role is now, if you can have it, whatever your area of interest in, there should be a pathway that's now being created for you. Based on the fact that you've got this 20 years of experience, you must have somewhere that you're interested, and hopefully kind of the local leadership or educational support would be able to guide you with that. I hope so.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nicola. Alison, I can see that you've got your hand up. Is that in relation to some of the questions that have been popped in the chat?
Hi, Lynsey. I've got a statement for you first before two questions. So Suzanne McDonald said, thanks for your presentation. Lots of familiar themes coming through in relation to losing her motivation, but more importantly, how privileged a career she feels she's had in adult mental health. She only was meant to be there for a 12-week holiday relief, and 37 years later, she's still learning and developing. So she's saying thank you for that. A couple of questions, one from Pamela Kern. She's asking, did Lynsey get encouragement from colleagues, or were there challenges re your self-motivation? So often the same individuals get similar opportunities, but she's just wondering if you got encouragement.
I kind of had to, when I felt a bit isolated and I was struggling with my value, it wasn't with usually it's not the teams that I work with every day, because it wasn't the teams that I was working within. I'm happy with that role. It was me thinking about where I wanted to go next and what my opportunities were going to be. And so when it came to that next rung of support, that's been sometimes a bit intermittent. So I had to kind of look at other opportunities that I could diversify, if you like. And I think Chelsea had asked if there's any advice on where to find leadership courses and sessions within the NHS. The leadership course was advertised on our intranet, NHS Lothian, and I applied for it. So I think the intranet is really useful. That has been for us, and obviously NES, I'm sure, offer a lot of leadership courses. The leadership course that I participated in was a kind of joint venture with Napier. So yeah, in some ways I'm not sure, but that's my experience.
Okay, I haven't got any more questions. I'm just going to open it up if anyone wants a last minute question for Lynsey. You've stunned them into silence, Lynsey. You were so good and honest.
Suzanne, just picking up on your comment there about recommending the session to other colleagues. We're only running this session today, but it has been recorded and it will be uploaded to the NES YouTube channel. So I'll post a link to that in the chat. So if you can just just subscribe to the YouTube channel and just keep an eye on that, and that will be added, and I'll pop the link in shortly. Can you see a couple of hands going up now? Nicola?
Lynsey, I'm only new to the NHS, only started in June last year in business support. It's a kind of, the NHS is something I've always wanted to get in and do have a kind of natural caring nature, and kind of COVID was probably the inspiration for me to apply with these. My thought is for someone that's kind of always been kind of administrative side, to possibly look into maybe clinical, because I don't know where I want my career to go. My position right now is a fixed term. Like, what kind of would you advise for someone to kind of try and get into the kind of like maybe like nursing, kind of healthcare support work side of it?
So are you based at home right now, or are you kind of working at hospital grounds?
Business support for the North East Health Centres, so treatment room reception staff that I deal with. So we are based in the centres. I'm at home just now, but we are based in the centres every day, and we deal with like phlebotomy in the treatment rooms and that kind of thing.
Speak to your colleagues. They're all themselves fonts of knowledge as well. It might feel a bit daunting to just kind of go and speak to some people, especially if you have been working from home through the pandemic. But I would just encourage you to speak to everybody that's in the clinical area that you work in, and if they don't know an answer, they can probably signpost you on the way to people who will. For me, as I said, it was being a clinical support worker, because I had in my head that I wanted to do some sort of clinical role. But hopefully the tips as well that I've given about, when you're struggling with your motivation, hopefully you can apply them to any situation where you can feel a wee bit lost. But I would encourage you to speak to your colleagues where you work.
Okay, thank you.
We've got one very last question from Megan. That's just posted about training posts like the one that you did. Are they advertised as jobs on the NHS Scotland job website? Just before we move on to that, just to say that Emily has given a good tip about looking out for the healthcare support worker bank, and accessing that as a way to kind of get into various different areas that you might be interested in. So just going back to Megan's question about training posts.
So the route for people looking to be an anaesthesia associate at the moment in Scotland is a little bit of a dead end, or a little bit complicated. It's up to each health board to recruit anaesthesia associates, and we are trained via distance learning through the University of Birmingham at the moment. And so basically a bit of distance learning, and the majority of it is just kind of working in the clinical environment. There might be scope in the future where this could change, probably within the next couple of years if it is going to change. So if you're interested, then watch this space. There's also the role of physician associates, and they are trained through Aberdeen, and they've been kind of more widely recruited through NHS Scotland. So if you're interested in that, take a wee look, and maybe it'll be for you.
Thanks, Lynsey. So I'm afraid we've run out of time. Thanks for all your questions, everyone, and for engaging in the chat throughout Lynsey's presentation. As we've said, the recording will be available as soon as we can get it onto the site so that you can look at it again, and by all means share with colleagues who wanted to come along or who you want to share the story with. And just, I think this is probably the last session for the day for most of us. So I hope you've had a good day, and I hope you've had a good week. And just another day and a half to go until we reach the end of the week. But thank you everyone for joining, and thanks again, Lynsey, for taking your time today. Bye everyone.